Star Wars The Force Unleashed originally released on the Wii in 2008. After a few successful releases on Switch, Aspyr have opted to bring across the Wii motion-controlled version, which was identical to the PS2 and PS Vita releases, with a few differences including the ability to play multiplayer duels. With a new lick of paint and some refined motion controls, on Switch is a Star Killer born? Well, let's find out.
Your master.
The narrative acts to bridge the gap between the first and second trilogies, and features the previously unheard of Star Killer, aka Vader's apprentice, and you'll witness exactly how he came to serve the Sith Lord. Playing as Star Killer on his journey through the dark side, the adventure will take you across several planets in the galaxy and bring you face to face with Jedi and Sith alike. Star Killer, voiced by Sam Witwer, is by far the most interesting character.
What is your bidding, my master?
He's not outshone by Vader, which is saying something, and it's evident that George Lucas had a part to play to ensure that it not only fit within the universe, but it felt like a useful addition to it. Not quite a typical redemption story, there's enough story to justify the combat, and let's just say the final choice is left up to the player. As far as gameplay and controls go, this is an action-heavy adventure. The Wii was the only version that had motion controls until now. Aspyr have done a good job to bring those across, and rather than feel like a gimmick, they actually add to the experience. As you sprint down a corridor, jutting the left joycon forward will perform a force push, or hold one of the triggers and lift an enemy off the ground, and then flick the right joycon to impale them with your lightsaber. It's worth noting right off the bat that you can disable these and use standard controls, but the motion works really well. Slashing down with your hand is reflected on screen, as are each of the directions. You can lock onto enemies by clicking in the stick, and it's an action game in its truest sense. Entering an area will generally seal it off, enemies will flood in, and if using motion controls, you'll initially be flapping away like a headless chicken, but as you hone your own skills, you'll learn the best ways to take out certain enemies. Lightsaber combos can be combined with force powers, with new ones being unlocked. As well as this, there's an upgrade system. This allows you to spend the in-game currency, which you'll gain by killing enemies, to put more points into different force skills. At around the halfway point of the game, these unlock further, which is linked to the narrative and Star Killer becoming a much more powerful force user. There's that very cool moment where previously difficult enemies are sent flying in all directions with a brand new skill, with new ones being unlocked across the course of the game. For boss fights, motion controls are used slightly differently. Once your adversary's health is whittled down to a certain level, you'll find a quick time event of sorts, and you'll need to move the corresponding Joy-Cons in the right directions to deal the final blow. It's certainly more intuitive to perform this with motion controls as opposed to the standard control scheme, but it's still one of the most dated elements of the game. A stronger implementation are those that require you to rotate the Joy-Con and then flick them, and the same can be said for the force powers. I mentioned the force push, but it's the choke that steals the show. Holding down the trigger, by twisting your left hand, you'll begin to choke the life out of the enemy. That physical twisting motion really adds something to the experience. Health and force powers are shown at the top of the screen. Unlike more modern titles, health pickups are required to replenish this, but your force level recharges over time. Both of these can be further bolstered through pickups, but there's no real nuance in the Wii version. Enemies will simply flood towards you at all times, and it lacks the stealth element seen in the 360 version. As well as upgrading your skills, you can also change your lightsaber. Throughout the levels, you'll find several crystals to enhance its abilities, as well as a few different hilts, and obviously coloured crystals. This version also caters for the old cheats from the Wii game, so that those can be used, and you'll be unlocking several different costumes, or you could just use a cheat code to allow Han Solo to wield a lightsaber, which feels so right. Each level hides a number of hidden collectibles, and these holographic cubes unlock lore, which can be viewed when back on your ship. Finally, we've got the multiplayer mode. This allows two people to play head-to-head, and for those interested, you can use two Joy-Con and use them in horizontal mode. There are certain pickups, and it turns it into more of a beat-em-up. It's straightforward enough, but it's not going to rival Smash Brothers. Still, it's nice to have it in here, with stages based upon the levels you've played through. Gameplay then, while a little dated, is fast and enjoyable, and there's a tangible feeling of becoming more powerful throughout the adventure. Its biggest weakness comes from repetition. repetition, but it doesn't outstay its welcome. And with various locations and numerous different enemies to fight, it remains enjoyable throughout its runtime. The motion controls work well, and there are several options for tweaking the camera, but it has its moments where it might get stuck or clip through some scenery. Gameplay scores 15 out of 20. The motion controls are quite good, but the old school auto-centering camera when you look up and down did get on my nerves a little bit. Controls score 16 out of 20. Onto the visuals and performance then, and straight off the bat, Aspyr have got the game running at 60 frames per second, and I don't think I saw a single frame drop. This is a real relief. What with some of the other releases we've seen brought across with a few issues, that's not the case here. The game appears to be running at native resolution, as you'd hope it would, but if you're familiar with the Xbox 360 version, which ran on the Ronin engine and had many more lighting effects and was a much more beautiful game, but there are a few new effects, such as a shallow depth of field, and while clearly not as revolutionary as they once were, their physics, while sometimes providing hilarious results, give your abilities a feeling of weight and impact, and at times it looks reasonably pretty. Some of the character models and textures do show the game's age, as does some of the geometry in the locations, but when you shrink everything down into a handheld form factor and keep that 60 frames per second, it's quite delightful playing this one in handheld. The audio is always going to be a strong point in a Star Wars game, and particular credit has to go to the voice actors, who it has to be said have aged far better than their character models. Visuals and performance score 16 out of 20. The excellent audio scores 18 out of 20.
What's that?
Star Wars The Force Unleashed will set you back £17.99 or your regional equivalent. While some of its elements feel a little dated, as far as performance goes, it's almost perfect. The campaign is reasonably short at just over 6 hours, and that's probably its biggest weakness when it comes to value. And I am glad to see that they included the multiplayer mode, albeit only locally. You're looking at a 4GB download, and replayability would come in the form of secret hunting and maybe using some of those cheat codes. I'd give value 16 out of 20. I'm pleased to say that Star Wars The Force Unleashed on Nintendo Switch performs really well. That and how the motion controls would function were my main concern. It's a really fun, if sometimes repetitive action game with a solid story. It gets a SwitchUp score of 81%. Let me know in the comments if this is one you're looking at, if you've been interested in it, and hopefully this review has been able to answer any questions you had. If not, then pop them down below. A thanks to our patrons and our new ones, and to all of you that watch the channel, and for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!
This'll teach you.